What's going on, everyone? I think we're going to be watching this on a Tuesday if everything goes correctly. No, I know we will finish this today, but it's a little bit longer. So I'm not going to be able to stop and talk as much just so we can get through with that, which you probably don't mind. But this is Winter Hibiscus Part 7. It's pretty difficult. I hope I'm going to be able to read it correctly. I mean, there's some big words here, some that we'll talk about, but that I hope I can pronounce that correctly the first time. We'll talk about that. If you notice, hopefully a little bit of good news. If you notice when you took the vocabulary quiz for Winter Hibiscus and the study guide, they were all listed as Part 1 because I wanted that there are so many words here that I think can help you in the future. We were going to have a Part 2, but I thought we're going to be having some poetry coming up later on in the week where there are some difficult words there. So we'll just talk about these words. Hopefully they'll kind of get in your mind, and maybe the next time you see them, you'll be like, I kind of know what that means. Using context clues, all that stuff. So let's get into it right here. We ended on paragraph 112. There are going to be some tie sentences that I will probably skip. I'm not a plant guy. I don't know a lot about plants. So there are going to be some terms like I don't know what those mean. And I think I'm already talking too much, but I think one of the hard parts about like reading difficult material is knowing like what you need to know and then like what really doesn't matter. So I would argue today they're going to be throwing out like a ton of different plant names. Like I don't know those flowers or whatever. And if you do, great. It might add a little bit to what we read. But if you don't, I think if you just like, okay, different kinds of plants, you don't have to look up every single one to get an idea of the story. If there are some words in the story that you don't know, as long as you can figure out kind of what they mean with the context clues, that's good. That's a bonus. It won't slow you down in your reading so much. All right, let's do it. 112 here. The Saba hedge at the top, tall and lush, had surrounded their garden. Its lush green leaves dotted with vermilion flowers, and sometimes after a monsoon rain, a blossom or two would have blown into the well so that she drew up the well water. She would find a red blossom floating in the bucket. That might be symbolism for something. That might not be. Not sure. You could probably find symbolism in almost everything here. 113. Slowly, Sang walked down the narrow aisle toward the hibiscus, orchids, lana bushes, orielanders, elephant ear begonias, and bougainvillea vines surrounded her. No idea what those are, right? Plants that she had not even realized she had known, but had forgotten, drew her back into her childhood world. So that could be possibly important, that even though she's in a foreign country, there are some things that remind her of Thailand. So there's a little piece of her childhood she can still remember through those plants. That could be important. I think, okay, just one theme. Okay, one theme of the story. How about that? What's a theme? We've only talked about it very briefly, but if you could, somebody very intelligent, I'm sure in here, raise your hand. You may have heard this before. A theme is the author's message. Not every story you read will have a theme. In fact, probably most don't, but in English class, there might be. But is the author trying to teach you something? And maybe, I don't know, does anybody have any thoughts on what the theme of this is? I think the theme of this might be for saying, it's like, hey, even though you're in a new place, if you work hard at it and give it enough time, you might be able to fit in. I think that's what that is. Like, don't give up hope is another, common theme you might hear in places. So already, I'm talking a little bit too much, but I think these are important points, and I do want to finish today. So it's my fault. I know it's my fault, but let's keep trucking here. Only 2 paragraphs in. I will try to be quiet for the rest of the time and just read. When she got to the hibiscus, she reached out and touched a petal gently. It felt smooth and cool with a hint of velvet towards the center, just as she had known it would feel. I can't stop. Okay, I'm going to keep going. And beside, it was yet another old friend. Small shrub with waxy leaves and dainty flowers with purplish petals and white centers. Madagascar periwinkle, its tag announced. How strange to see it in a pot, Sang thought. Back home, it just grew wild, jutting out from the cracks and brick walls and between tiled roofs. There had been a patch of it by the little spirit house where she had used to help her mother light the incense and candles to the spirit who guarded their home and their family. Sometimes she would casually pick a flower or two to leave on the offering of fruit and rice left at the altar. And that rich, sweet scent, that was familiar too. Sang scanned the greenery around her and found a tall, gangly plant with exquisite little white blossoms on it. So she knows the Thai name, and hopefully there will be a tag that says the English name, she said, savoring the feel of the word on her tongue, even as she silently noted the English name on its tag, Jasmine. So right there, really quickly, trying to make that connection between her old world and her new world. Like, yeah, they're different. There are different names for them, but when it comes down to it, they are the same. All right, 117. One of the blossoms had fallen off, and carefully, Sang picked it up and smelled it. She closed her eyes and breathed in deeply. The familiar fragrance filled her lungs, and Sang could almost feel the light strands of her grandmother's long gray hair, freshly washed, as she combed it out with a fine-toothed buffalo horn comb. Just remember that, okay? Gray hair. Keep that, just put that in the back of your mind. And when the sun had dried it, Sang would help the gnarled old fingers knot the hair into a bun and then slip a Doc Malik bud into it. Okay, bringing back memories of her grandmother and her grandmother's gray hair. Sang looked at the white bud in her hand now, small and fragile. Gently, she closed her palm around it, held it tight. That, at least, she could hold on to. But where was the fine-toothed comb, the hibiscus hedge, the well, her gentle grandmother? A wave of loss so deep and strong that it stung Sang's eyes now swept over her. A blink, channel switch, boat ride in the night. It was all gone. Irretrievably, irrevocably gone. I knew I would mess up on that. Yeah, so instead of like going over those two very difficult words, let's just talk about this. If you see that, you see those two words that are difficult to pronounce, irretrievably, irrevocably gone. You don't need to know exactly what those words mean, but you get a sense after reading this, like, oh, it's never coming back. And I think that's one of the hardest things for families who have to pick up and move is that usually what we might call the nuclear family, like that family of the parents and siblings and all that stuff, like that, the core family, they get to leave, maybe, most of them, hopefully, but it's the uncles and aunts and grandmothers that don't get to come. So obviously she's missing her grandmother. Right, back to this. It was already dusk when Sang reached home. So that's kind of like we didn't read this part here. Everybody's favorite word, moist. But she's going to break down and cry in that greenhouse. So maybe that's just something that's going to help her adjust to moving here and getting over how she doesn't fit in. Let me share that. Yeah, maybe that's just part of the healing process. Very fancy word we might use is cathartic. If you have to go through something really bad, like I don't know, whatever, moving to a new country, the death, just having a really good cry about something sometimes helps. So maybe as she sat down in that greenhouse and just wept, might have been a little awkward for the lady who owned the greenhouse, but it might have made Sang feel better. It might have been cathartic for her that she can now adjust to this new life. It was already dark when Sang reached home. The wind was blowing harder, tearing off the last remnants of green in the chicory weeds that were growing out of the cracks in the sidewalk. As if oblivious to the cold, her mother was still out in the vegetable garden, digging up the last of the onions with a rusty trowel. She did not see Sang until the girl had quietly knelt down next to her. Oh, yeah, this whole part here. The mom is probably going to be mad. $20? Big Mac? We'll find out what happened here with the $20. Maybe not good for Sang. Let me make that bigger. Her smile of welcome warmed Sang. And then she says, something there in Lao. Did I say Thai before? Something there in Lao. You're back, she said cheerfully. Goodness, it's past 5. What took you so long? How did it go? Did you? Then she noticed the potted plant that Sang was holding, its leaves quivering in the wind. Mrs. Povong uttered a small cry of surprise and delight. So she says it in Lao. Where'd you get it? I bought it, Sang answered, dreading her mother's next question. How much? For answer, Sang handed her mother some coins. That's all, Miss Povong said, appalled. Oh, but I forgot. You and the Lambert boy ate Big Macs. No, we didn't, Mother, Sang said. Then what else? Nothing else. I paid over $19 for it. You what? Her mother stared at her incredulously. That's a good word. Incredulously. Like you can't believe it in a mad way. Authors will use that word all the time. So when you hear it, see it, you can't believe it, and you're pretty mad. Incredulous. I can't believe you did that, basically. But how? Right here. But how could you? All the seeds for this vegetable garden didn't cost that much. You know how we... She paused as she noticed the tear stains on her daughter's cheeks and her puffy eyes. What happened? She asked more gently. I failed the test, Sang said. For a long moment, Mrs. Povong said nothing. Sang did not dare look at her mother in the eye. Instead, she stared at the hibiscus plant and nervously tore off a leaf, shredding it to bits. Her mother reached out. So that reminds us, right, when she was tearing those leaves after she lost. So I don't know, maybe that's not a natural. I don't know, maybe I don't know. I don't want to look too much into how Sang is feeling, but the fact that she's tearing off that maybe is letting her mom know, like, oof, she's in a bad place. Maybe I need to try to smooth things over here. So luckily the mom does. Her mother reached out, brushed the fragments of green off Sang's hands. It's a beautiful plant, this, that, and Lao. She finally said, I'm glad you got it. It's not a real one, Sang mumbled. I mean, it's not like we had it. She found that she was still too shaky to say the words at home. Lest she burst into tears again. Not like the kind we had before, she said. I think this is important right here, okay? We won't talk too much about it because this is already going on pretty long, but I think this paragraph, I think this paragraph, if I can highlight it, is fairly important. I know, her mother said quietly. I've seen this kind blooming along the lake. Its flowers aren't as pretty, but it's strong enough to make it through the cold months here. This winter hibiscus, that's what matters. So, I mean, I'll just pause here. We're just getting long, but this might go on a little bit longer, but at least we'll be done. That paragraph. Does that mean anything to anybody? Yeah, it's symbolism, stuff like that. I'll pause here. All right, so I think what the author is trying to do is compare Sang to that winter hibiscus. It was able to flourish in Lao. It's a little bit harder here for the winter hibiscus because it's what did it say? It's not as pretty, but it can make it through the winter months. You know, it's tough. So I think there's that comparison there. That's why the author put that in there. So not every reader is going to pick up on that, but it's just a little deeper meaning to what they're writing. Comparing Sang to and it's called the winter hibiscus. So, you know, we think that's probably kind of important right there. All right, she tipped the pot and deftly eased out the ball out of the soil, balancing the rest of the plant in her other hand. Look how root bound it is. Poor thing, she said, let's plant it right now. So again, like comparing this plant, whatever, right here, this plant that it's all like kind of like cooped up, it's been confined by this plant. Now that they're taking it out of its plant, it can out of the pot, it can flourish. Maybe the same with Sang. Maybe now she's finally free. She failed that test once. Maybe she won't fail it again. We'll get to the last lines that are important to this. All right, let's keep going. She went over to the corner of the vegetable patch and started to dig a hole in the ground. The soil was cold and hard, and she had trouble thrusting the shovel into it. Wisps of her gray hair trailed out in the breeze, and her slight frown deepened the wrinkles around her eyes. So that gray hair is back, and I don't know if the author is just trying to connect the mom to the grandmother now. There was a frail, wiry beauty to her that touched Sang deeply. So it could be a callback to the grandmother there. Here, let me help, Mother, she offered, getting up and taking the shovel away from her. Mrs. Provong made no resistance. I'll bring in the hot peppers and bitter melons, then, and start dinner. How would you like an omelet with slices of bitter melon? I'd love it, Sang said. Left alone in the garden, Sang dug out a hole and carefully lowered the winter hibiscus into it. She could hear the sounds of cooking from the kitchen now, the beating of the eggs against the bowl, the sizzle of hot oil in the pan, the pungent smell of bitter melon. Why do I keep bitter? Why do I keep pronouncing the T's there? Bitter melon wafted out, and Sang's mouth watered. It was a cultivated taste, she had discovered. None of her classmates or friends, not even Mrs. Lambert, liked it, this sharp, bitter melon that left a golden aftertaste on the tongue. But she had grown up eating it. And she admitted to herself, much preferred it to a Big Mac. So again, I can't highlight everything I want to, but I think that could be important too, that even though she is in this country, she can still taste some of the foods that she tasted back in Laos, and the people around here, they don't like it. Really quickly, this is going on long, I'm sorry. But last night I was watching a travel video from a country called Uzbekistan. And there they eat horse meat, okay? United States, that's illegal because it's a working animal. It's just kind of like, it's taboo. We don't eat horse in the United States. Just, we don't. But you can imagine little Uzbek kids, growing up, and maybe their mother or their father is making horse. And just like maybe for us at Thanksgiving, if you've grown up in the United States, that's a tradition for a lot of families. Some people in other parts of the world might think, what, turkey? Why are you eating that? That bird's nasty. I don't know if there are people like that. But just like when you grow up with certain foods, there's another. Has anyone, please let me know, has anyone ever had something called durian? Durian? I know it is very popular in Japan. But to me, if you've ever, it's pungent, it's bitter, it's just has a taste that I hate. But some people grew up eating durian. It doesn't even grow in this country, I don't think. And they love it, I'm sure. So it's just the different tastes. When you had something as a child, little kid, and you have it now, you might remember, or I don't know, maybe Halloween's coming up, Halloween candy that you can only get, like the crackle, the rice. Do you know crackle? That I only usually have that during Halloween, because they don't really sell the full size crackle bars. You can only get the little ones. And that's just I have it almost every Halloween, usually 3, 4, or whatever, but you can only get them in the minis. I wish they sold it has rice in it, like crunchy rice. It's almost like a crunch bar, but it's not. Anyways. All right, let's go. This is 20 minutes, but at least we don't have to do 2 parts. We'll get it all done today. We're almost done here. It would be helpful if I shared this. Let's go. Boom. The winter hibiscus was in the ground now, and Sang tamped down the soil around it. Overhead, a flock of Canadian geese flew by, their faint honks clear and, yes, probably pretty important, familiar to Sang now. So she's been here 4 years. She's starting to realize how things work around here. Almost reluctantly, she realized that many of the things that she had thought of as strange before had become, through the quiet repetition of season upon season, almost familiar to her now. Like the geese, she lifted her head and watched as their distinctive V was etched against the evening sky, slowly fading into the distance. When they come back, sang Val silently to herself, in the spring, when the snow melts and the geese return and this hibiscus is budding, then I will take the test again. All right, pretty important lines there. Boom. There's hope. Yeah, that might be a theme of this story too. There's hope. Even when things are bad, there's a glimmer of hope. All right. Hope you enjoyed this. I know this last little bit was a bit tedious maybe to some. I mean, some of those plant names, like you could have skipped that, just like at the beginning of the story. Like maybe the author spent a little bit too much time describing the leaves and stuff. Maybe I could have shortened that, as an author or whatever. Maybe the author could have shortened that part we read to about like half of it, and we still would have understood everything. But all right, poetry will be coming up soon. Adios.